The neighbor principle is a fundamental concept in tort law that establishes a duty of care owed by individuals or entities to their neighbor. In Malaysia, as in other jurisdictions, the neighbor principle asserts that a defendant must exercise reasonable care to avoid actions or omissions that could reasonably, foreseeably harm their neighbors. In the context of Malaysian law, the term neighbor refers to someone who is so closely and directly affected by an individual's actions that they should reasonably be considered when making a decision. This means that an individual must take into account the potential impact of their actions on others, particularly those who are closely connected to the situation at hand. The essence of neighbor principle lies in the idea of foreseeability and proximity. This requires individuals to consider their reasonably foreseeably consequences of other actions and take steps to prevent harm to those who could be affected by them.
Let's examine a pivotal case in the realm of negligence law focusing on the concept of duty of care. The case in question is Donohue and Stevenson that heard in 1932. In this instance, Mrs. Donohue and her friends were at a cafe in Scotland. Mrs. Donohue's friend purchased a bottle of ginger beer for her, which was enclosed in an opaque bottle, which prevented Mrs. Donohue from seeing its content. As she started consuming the ginger beer, she discovered that it contained a decomposed nail. Predictably, Mrs. Donohue suffered illness as a result of ingesting the contaminated drink, prompting her to file a lawsuit against Stevenson, the beverage manufacturer. This case is crucial in establishing the neighborhood principle. In his judgment, Lord Atkins asserted that one must exercise reasonable care to avoid actions or omission likely to harm one's neighbor. Thus, introducing the neighbor test, this implies that a defendant owes a duty of care to their neighbor. The question that arises, who qualifies as your neighbor? According to Lord Atkins, a neighbor is someone so directly and closely affected by our actions that we should have them in mind when we act. Applying this to the Donohue and Stevenson case, in the production of drinks, Stevenson must consider the end user as their neighbor. Consequently, it was determined in the case that Stevenson did indeed owe Mrs. Donohue a duty of care. Manufacturers are obligated to exercise care to prevent harm to consumers. This decision solidified the duty of care test, broadening its application to anyone reasonably within the defendant's contemplation.
The case that I have chosen was Sri Alam Holdings Sdn Bhd versus Majlis Perbadaran Pasir Gudang, Johor, in the year of 2018. In this case, Sri Alam Sdn Bhd was the plaintiff, while Majlis Perbadaran Pasir Gudang were the defendants. The case is about the road construction and maintenance work. During the construction, the defendant's activity have caused excessive water to flow onto the plaintiff land, and as a result, it have damaged the plaintiff property. Sri Alam Holding have filed a lawsuit to the defendants alleging negligence and seeking compensations for the damages. The court examined whether the defendants owe a duty of care to the plaintiff and whether they had breached that duty. The court considered a factors such as foreseeability, proximity, and standard of care expected in a similar situation. Ultimately, the court found the defendants' negligence in their construction's work, as they had failed to take reasonable precautions to prevent the water from flowing onto the plaintiff land. The defendant were held liable for the negligence, and the plaintiff was awarded for the damages. This case demonstrates the application negligence principle in Malaysian law, highlighting the importance of upholding the duty of care and accountability in cases where negligence actions result in harm to others.
In business law, the neighborhood principle refers to the duty of care owned by businesses to their neighbors or surrounding community. This principle emphasizes that businesses must conduct their operation in a manner that does not unreasonably interfere with the rights or interests of neighboring properties or residents. It covers aspects such as noise pollution, environmental impact, traffic congestion, and other potential disturbance. In this case of Sri Alam Holdings Sdn Bhd versus Majlis Perbadaran Pasir Gudang, the significance of the neighborhood principle in business law is highlighted through the application of the duty of care owned by the businesses to their neighboring community. This case likely involved a dispute where Sri Alam Holdings Sdn Bhd, as a business entity, was accused of actions or operation that negatively impacted the surrounding neighborhood or community, possibly through environmental pollution, noise disturbance, or other similar issues. Majlis Perbadaran Pasir Gudang, representing the community or local government, likely brought forth the legal action against Sri Alam Holdings Sdn Bhd. The significance of neighborhood principle in this case will revolve around the determination of whether Sri Alam Holding Sanjam Berhad breaches its duty of care of the neighborhood community. Courts will have considered factors such as nature of the business operation, the extent of the impact of neighborhood, and whether the actions of business were reasonable. The outcome of the case would likely have implications of business operating in similar content, emphasizing the importance of conducting operation in manner that minimize adverse effect on the surrounding neighborhood and complying with relevant regulation and standards. This case law will serve a precedent for future disputes involving the neighborhood principle in business law within the jurisdiction of Sri Alam Holding Sanjam Berhad and Majlis Perbandaran Pasir Gudang.
Hi, I'm Shanani. In summary, the neighbor principle in Malaysia tort law underscores the duty of care onto those directly impacted by one's action. This principle, grounded in foreseeability and proximity, is pivotal in navigating illegal intricacies of businesses, exemplified by cases like Sri Alam Holdings. The Sri Alam Holdings case vividly demonstrates the application of negligence principles, emphasizing the importance of accountability and a proactive approach to prevent harm. As we engage in business risk, it is crucial to recognize the far-reaching consequences of our action on our neighbors. In conclusion, the neighbor principle isn't merely a legal obligation, but a call for ethical conduct derived from cases like Donayu vs. Stevenson and Anne vs. Merton. It serves as a lifestyle guiding us to success with responsibility, empathy, and a profound understanding of our interconnected role in the legal fabric society.